What? No. No, I'm the one who comes to your rescue. What are you talking about? Whatever, no.
Hello and welcome back to A Stark Contrast, where we discuss the differences and similarities from Marvel Comics to their MCU counterparts. We're your hosts, Geoffrey
and Dai.
Hello, and welcome back, everybody.
Howdy doody.
Going all right, Dai?
Oh my goodness. So we're recording the day after Halloween.
Yes.
Spooky season is officially gone.
100%. And it's Christmas time.
God.
I'm going to play some Mariah Carey.
Mariah Carey, yeah. And it happens every year. Because again, and if people who really know me know that like Halloween is my thing.
Yeah.
Like I love Halloween.
Yeah.
But just that I really go in on experiences and doing things and all the spooky stuff. And so I started like September 1st, but even then it still feels like it lasted all of 2 days and it's gone.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know, it kind of sucks, but yeah, I guess it's
I mean, yeah, I will say Halloween doesn't feel like Halloween like it used to, at least for me.
No,
I mean,
I agree.
as of recent years,
Yeah.
definitely like, at least for sure the last 5 years, I don't really dress up
Yeah.
or go.
Sure.
I mean, I went out one year, a couple years ago, but I don't really like go out of my way to be like, oh, what are we doing for Halloween? Like, so
Yeah.
yeah, I'm also just super lazy to make and do a costume.
Sure. I get it.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. And especially on a Tuesday. And so it's like less initiative to kind of go out and do it. But
yeah.
yeah, no, it's good otherwise. I mean, yeah, I guess Christmas is fine.
I mean, I get 2 weeks off for Christmas for work.
I
so.
know. I miss that. I'm kind of like, okay, I'm looking forward to all the time off. Let's just say that. Because we do have daylight savings coming up, which is Sunday, tomorrow, if you're listening to this on Saturday.
Oh my God.
And we fall back, so we get another hour back. So it's the good one.
Oh my God.
And then we have Veterans Day coming up, and then we have Thanksgiving.
Veterans Day?
Yes.
What the hell? I thought we had one already.
No, probably Labor Day.
Maybe. You're right.
Yeah. And so,
Dang.
yeah, so we're chock full of holidays and time off. So there's an up. Definitely looking forward to that. In other news, or at least podcast news. So thanks to everybody who checked out our not live stream, but our like live recording. Our video. Yeah.
Portion of the pod.
Yeah. So for those of you who missed it, it is on YouTube. Probably gonna leave it there, but check it out. And it is also streaming audio only, where you get your podcasts. But it's our classic mini Marvel. We're just talking about all the good things. And yeah, thanks for all the positive reviews and excitement and all the good stuff. People seem to enjoy it, so that's really cool.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're definitely down to do it again. If you guys like seeing our faces.
I know. I forgot what somebody said, but they were just like, it's funny to actually see how we interact with the dialogue, and also like when some of the jokes that we do, and like your reactions, especially to things. Because like sometimes when it's just silent, people don't know how to visualize what kind of face you're making. Like I know, I know, and I react. But like for people to see that, like your reactions, genuine reactions, are pretty funny, as well as like the impersonations and all that. So I think it was Andrew was like, didn't expect to have a Mobius impression on my bingo card. And I was like, dude, it came out of nowhere. Like I couldn't help it. But yeah, like stuff like that, which is pretty fun. So yeah, we'll hopefully do it again sometime. And in the very least for mini Marvels, all things considered. And so Loki season 2, what episode we're on? This week was episode 5, I guess. So we only have one more until the season finale. And we're recording before episode 5.
That's right.
So we just did the whole Victor Timely thing, which was pretty incredible. And yeah, I don't. I have no prediction. I have no solid prediction.
I know, which is really good.
Yeah.
I have no idea. Like after the ending of what happened in episode 4, I was like, oh.
Because spoiler alert, he straight up died.
Yeah.
He's dead.
Yeah. So I was like, oh. So what happens?
Yeah, and I said to my friend who was visiting, I was like, I'm almost wondering, like, is there a version of this, like, spoiler alert, where Miss Minutes is like a variant of Ravonna? Like, is she a Renslayer variant in some way? And what is the possibility of that? And is Renslayer gonna turn and be the worst one? Like, there's so many ways that it could go.
Yeah.
Many of which I'm sure are going to be answered in this episode that just passed, that we're, as we're recording. So I don't know, but I'm excited. I'm sad to see that it's already ending.
I know.
But
because after the finale, it's the Marvels.
Yeah.
So crazy.
Last time we'll see Loki for who knows.
I know.
Speaking of Loki, so there was that thing that I mentioned in the mini Marvel, I think, or even our Kang episode about the Loki charms.
Yes, the cereals.
And there's also Spider-Man Wheaties for the game. And so I had to decide between the two. Like, if I were to have one.
Were they not both available in store?
They were. They were both available, but I was like, Wheaties. But also, Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So I chose one. And I got
Loki charms.
Loki charms.
Oh, that looks so sick.
And so and I think it's cooler than the first one.
My eyes.
Yeah, so it has a lenticular cover. I'll put a video or and pictures of it on social media. But yeah, it's all fashioned like the retro TVA style. It's pretty cool. I kind of wish that they had actually changed the shapes, but I know that would have been a big ask.
Yeah.
Because they only made so many boxes. I'm not sure how much that one was, but yeah.
Well, this is crazy.
It's pretty cool.
Are you going to eat the cereal?
I mean, I think I can figure out. I think I can finagle the box and close it up and stuff. But yeah, so I did not get the Spider-Man ones. I'm sure it's really cool. If anybody has one, send us a picture. They do have two versions. One of Miles and one of Parker.
Oh, that's so sick.
And so I don't think you can put them together to make one spider, like, like the silhouette of their face.
Yeah.
Like, it's only half their face. But I don't think you could put them together. I think it's on the same side of the box. But they sold out of the limited edition version of.
They always do.
So I was like, wow, that's a lot of money for a box of cereal, but whatever. It's a collector's item. And so speaking of Spider-Man 2, yeah, so I anticipated to be done by now, along with Jeff, but Halloween did not agree with that. So Halloween was like, no, you're going to enjoy me before you finish this game. So we're going to actually cover the gameplay and the game itself story, the main story, spoilers and all, in our next episode, because I will hopefully be done with, at the very least, the story mode. But I know Jeff has finished and he's on.
And hopefully I'll be done by it the second. I'm in my second playthrough.
Yeah.
Of Road to another 100%.
Now, are you the type of gamer that will go all the way to the hardest, or do you just go one above?
I usually don't ever do the hardest ones. After I don't know, because there's not that many games where I'm like, ooh, I need to play through that story again because I know what's coming.
Yeah.
But with Spider-Man games, because of like the combat, I really love the combat.
Yeah.
And I love like the gadget system this year. I know a lot of people. I remember reading like some people didn't like it. I like the flying. The traversal is also
the traversal. Yeah.
Is so good. So I'm like, yeah. I was like, oh, let's just do it again. Might as well, since I literally beat the game in like a couple days after the opening weekend.
I feel like all of my gamer friends finished within the first 72 or more hours, but so I'm like really.
So I was like, oh, and then I was like, oh, I'd play that game again. So I was like, I just went one above.
Yeah.
The default.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll do it on Ultimate because.
I could.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I play Call of Duty, so I get raged just by dying. So if I keep dying during a single player game,
Sure.
it's gonna even be worse. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
How is he not dying?
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. And you live with people.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it was just
Who's
like
your roommate?
I'll just get like frustrated because I'm
Yeah.
like sometimes like I'll yell at myself. I'm like, I'm hitting circle, I'm hitting dodge.
Yeah.
What is going on? How is he able to hit me?
Yeah.
And it's like when
do
a
the same
brute
thing.
it hits me, it does so much damage, and I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
what the hell?
I hate those big guys. I mean, and I know we said we would save this for the next episode, but I hate the big guys.
Yeah.
Where you could feel like they're like about to swing and then they still hit you even though you try to parry and then you get slapped across the screen.
Yeah. So like,
And then they come back again and it's over.
so I'm treating this second playthrough like oh, what can I do better? How can I'll level up more so my combat will
Yeah.
be a little bit more advanced and
Yeah.
I can
And
practice.
your health too.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really a big thing too, and the focus. But yeah, we'll get into that
There's so
the next
much to talk
episode.
about.
Yeah.
I can't wait. So yeah, I'll be done by then. If you're playing or have played or have never played, we'd love to hear from you too. So be sure to send us all your comments on Spider-Man 2. That said, well, we can dive into the episode, and so just in time for the tail end of spooky season. And before we get into that, of course, we're not experts. We don't claim to be. We're just a couple of nerds nerding out. And so, yeah, we'll be nerding out over Jack Russell, Werewolf by Night. Ooh.
Woo!
Woo! Ow!
Ow!
So, created by Roy Thomas, Jeannie Thomas, Jerry Conway, and Mike Plug. Jack Russell, ironically enough and named, made his first appearance in Marvel Spotlight #2 in February of 1972. And so, depending on your source, this actually may have been published or at least printed in 1971, but dated 72. And this was one of the subtitles where they would introduce other characters into the fold. And so both Captain Marvel, well, Ms. Marvel, and Star-Lord were also released under this particular comic book title. And so this one focused on Werewolf by Night. Do you want to give a guess the cover price on this one? $72.
I'm gonna go 15 cents.
Close. Not quite. A
Higher?
little under. You're under.
I'm under?
You're under.
Oh my god.
I know, it's interesting because like
That is interesting, yeah.
because like as we recall, like the 60s or 63 was about 12 cents.
Exactly, yeah.
And so you think, okay, 10 years later, less than 10 years later, it has jumped to
20.
a whopping 25.
25?
25
Inflation, man.
inflation. So here's the picture of the cover. It pretty much tells you everything you need to know. And so this character is particularly interesting because he falls under the category or the umbrella of classic Universal or horror monsters, right?
Yes.
These are one of these like the Mummy, Dracula, Invisible Man type of deals. And so it was almost like an open, like public domain type of weirdness where a similar character was published under Atlas Comics in Marvel Tales number 116. And so that was back in 1953. So it was almost 20 years prior they actually introduced werewolf. But because of the creation of the Comics Code Authority in 1954, it was basically like comics cannot be like graphic or have horror or have like gratuitous amounts of violence.
Yeah.
And so they had to pump the brakes and revisit. They were like, okay, well, we can't do that because he's a werewolf.
Yeah.
It's graphic violence. Like he literally kills people all the time. And so most of these horror-centric creatures had to be tucked away until Marvel was able to figure out a way to kind of get through it and the loophole. And thankfully, the code was a bit more lenient by the 70s, and so just in time, you know, Stan was like, okay, they're easing up, let's go, let's do something. And so they then released this new version of the character with a human side named Jack Russell, who apparently was not named after the dog. It was
Wow.
not. It was not intentional.
You would
he
think.
he just happened to be named Jack Russell. But we'll of course get into that because there is a bit more depth to that name choice. But as far as this comic value goes, the highest that I was able to find on Shortbox was a CGC 9.2 for $1,700. Whereas on eBay, a CGC 9.4 is going for a very strange, very distinct price of $4,222.22.
Oh my gosh.
Somebody really likes even numbers.
That's what I'm saying.
And then the fair market value for the book at a 9.2, 3, or 4 goes anywhere between $1,600 and $3,000. So the person on eBay is shooting way too high. The person on Shortbox is just about right. So yeah, you could expect to get a book graded for that much. And then the lowest, somebody is selling a no grade version of it, no cover, no cover and no back cover, I think. For
But it's
100,
graded?
it's so bizarre. Yeah, I still don't understand why people do this. For $100,
Wow.
and then on eBay, also a no grade. I think it's the same book, and it might be the same seller for $125. So they're trying to make a little more money
a
over
little
there.
something, I guess.
Yeah, whereas you can get a raw copy for $125.
Oh my God.
So if you just go to the right person, you get a copy that's loose, and then you go grade it yourself, and it'll probably be more than that. It's better than a no grade, I'll say that much. And I did also find a 1.8 for $200. Not too bad, but might as well shoot for the stars and get a little better one. So yeah, first exposure to this character. I mean,
werewolf in general.
Yeah.
I feel like you kind of been exposed to it forever.
Yeah.
Going back to the
Universal Studios.
Exactly. Yeah.
The Wolfman, as they call it.
So, I mean, yeah. Every time I would go to Universal Studios, there's always a werewolf.
Yeah.
Like I used to go to the. I don't know if you would go to this all the time. That's when you go to Universal, the special effects kind of show.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that show.
It was so good. I was just thinking about that the other day too.
Yeah, like it's was like one of my favorite shows. Cause I would go to Universal like every summer as a kid, and so I was like, let's go to the special effects show. You go from room to room. You're doing they're doing the knife thing where they're cutting someone's arm, but it's like, oh my God,
chocolate syrup.
Yeah, but it's just corn syrup and and food coloring.
Yeah.
Whatever. And then I remember seeing the werewolf. Like it's like, oh my God, this thing is huge. So yeah. I mean, Universal is like, I mean, they're the original.
Yeah.
Right.
The Universal monsters. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. Same. I don't really remember. This is one of the ones where I don't recall the Marvel version almost whatsoever until maybe the 2000s, like when I started when the access from Marvel Unlimited, this is a ad-free plug, but from the app, because it would just randomize sometimes and it shows you like, oh, maybe you might want to check out this comic.
Yeah.
And so the access to all those comic books that were either out of print or way, 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 way from the classics is at the forefront. So it's just easy to breeze through 4 issues without having to pay a crazy amount of money to have them, So yeah, I don't remember at all. Like I probably have some trading cards of him, but as far as I was concerned, he was also the Wolfman. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about him other than he had the name Jack Russell, and I thought it was really funny.
Yeah, well, it was a dog.
Yeah, exactly. So I never really knew anything about the character until very recently, especially ahead of the Disney Plus TV special, as they call it.
Yeah.
And it's funny that you mentioned the Universal thing, the special effects show, because in my rewatch, because I watched the black and white, immediately jumped into the color version. So I watched it back to back.
Oh, wow, nice.
And immediately cartwheeled into the Director by Night. And so it's all about Michael Giacchino.
Yeah.
And it's the mini documentary.
Yeah.
And they talked about how when they were children, his brother does at least, they used to love making movies. And they used to love going to Universal Studios for that same reason. And I was like, that's kind of cool, actually.
Yeah.
And so it all comes back full circle. But yeah, as far as the character goes, so I have my little mini book here. I love this book so much. And he's actually in here. So if you must know, he is 6'8" tall.
Only?
when he's-
Damn, I thought it'd be at least over 7
werewolf.
foot.
Yeah, no, as a werewolf. And I'm going to say werewolf a lot. 300 pounds. But his short bio says, victim of a lycanthropic curse passed down from his 18th century ancestor, Jack Russell can become a wolfman at will and always when the moon is full. Most times, Jack locks himself in a safe room, but occasionally the werewolf by night hunts evil as a reluctant hero. It's pretty cut and dry.
Yeah.
It's very like, again, it's like the traditional sense of the character, but they've added these like modernized nuances
Yeah.
to kind of make it Marvel way.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we can get into that right now. So as funny as the name Jack Russell is, his actual name is actually Jacob Russoff. And so despite being which is very rare in Marvel Comics, a Los Angeles-based character,
My gosh.
Jack's lycanthrope lineage actually began as early as 1795 when a Romanian ancestor by the name of Grigori was bitten by a female werewolf servant of Dracula's. So this is like, I don't know about you, and I don't know if you watched like Dracula, all the various iterations of Dracula.
Yeah.
And Van Helsing and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So immediately, the tonality of these stories immediately comes to mind based on all that stuff. Immediately. So I hear like the thunder and it's dark and gray and all that stuff. And it really sets the tone for the story. And so Grigori was bitten by this werewolf servant who used to be like, I guess you could say, captive by Dracula. She got out and, they got into a squabble. He got bitten, but the bite itself didn't affect the bloodline. So it affected him, but he had children before the bite, and it didn't immediately affect them. They weren't like a pack of wolves. Like he was just a werewolf that was like in remission, if you will.
Oh.
Yeah. And so Grigori's great-great-grandson, Baron Gregory Russoff, acquired these scrolls of the Darkhold.
Wow.
Ding, 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 ding. And he recited this incantation of lycanthropy. For those of you who don't know what that is, a supernatural affliction of which humans are said to physically shapeshift into wolves. And it triggered the curse. So he was trying to get a hold of the scrolls because they're obviously powerful.
Yeah.
And then by reciting the incantation, he ensured that sleeping gene awoken, and so he cursed himself, and he would become a werewolf like his great-great-grandfather was. And so it's very interesting because when you read the Marvel Spotlight issue, the way that they go back and forth and show you like how it all happens, it's very, very theatrical. Like he's a wolf and he's got like shredded jeans and the mob is coming after him, at least Gregory,
Yeah.
And so they kill him. They inevitably kill him. And then the people discover, oh, it's the Baron. And so they tell his wife, who was pregnant with the second child at the time, like, hey, what the heck is going on? And she was actually American born. So she goes back to the United States with her children. And she then renamed. She then remarried a man named Philip Russell. And it's later revealed that Philip was actually Gregory's brother.
Jeez.
So Gregory and Laura married. They have 2 children, Jack and Lisa. Gregory dies.
Yeah.
Laura returns to America, marries Philip, who is Gregory's brother. So the children, Geoffrey just shaking his head like,
family
what
tree
the?
is this?
Yeah, so the children are raised by their stepfather, who is also their uncle.
What?
Yeah, it's all kind of convoluted.
weird.
And Philip himself is also kind of shady. So what it came down to is that Laura and Philip were actually in a relationship before she met Gregory. So Gregory stole Laura from his brother, to which after he dies, she then goes back to him. So it's not so bad, but I don't know. It's all kind of weird.
Yeah.
And so Over time, Jack's lichen curse then kicks in on a full moon on his 18th birthday. So the issue itself actually opens where he's kind of telling the story of like how he's having this dream where he's going through the streets and, you know, the sounds that he hears, and there's a person that he sees in the alleyway and tries to stab him, but he's able to like fend them off, and he ends up killing the person. And he wakes up and he's like, oh, it was just a dream, but it was reality. So he began to shapeshift without realizing it on his 18th birthday.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and so it began as something he absolutely could not control.
Yeah.
It was very much the very trope.
It's usually how it starts.
Yeah, exactly. Of like, oh, I can't contain myself.
I don't know what's happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Shut up.
And shred. And then he's, oh, and he becomes a werewolf, as we've seen in many other films. So he remained that way for 2 years before this cult called the Three Who Are All partially lifted the curse, and it allowed Jack to voluntarily shapeshift at any time and retain his human intellect while in werewolf form. So it's very much a Hulk-like situation, at least in the early days, where as Jack Russell, he's fine. He's a usual, like, the sly talking guy, whatever. But the minute he turns into a werewolf, he is a wolf. Like, he does not have any idea or recollection of what Jack knows, but he does refer to himself in third person. So he's werewolf and he's like, oh, Jack knows this person. Jack knows that woman, but I do not. And so he had this back and forth for quite a while. But since then, since the cult, no one has actually been able to successfully aid Jack with the werewolf curse. So even to this day, he still has issues retaining his power over the curse. He can't quite get a hold on it. So like the little book says, there are times where he'll still lock himself up in a safe room if he knows that there's a full moon coming.
Yeah.
Or, you know, what have you. And it's like, oh, well, that's his thing. Like, and I'm sure that there are many side stories where scientists have tried to help him, because Jack in the comics, he doesn't, especially modern times, he does not have a set place in the Marvel universe. You know what I mean? He kind of jumps around a bit.
Yeah.
So there's like monster adjacent characters and those circles. He runs in those circles, but like he's not always in like a Spider-Man book. He's not in a Fantastic Four book. So those characters that are very scientific driven aren't around, even though they do cross paths. He's more with the Moon Knight, the Morbius. He's all with those kinds of characters. Yeah. And you know, they're all cursed, so they're just in a little curse bubble among themselves. But on the cinematic side of things, Jack Russell, also werewolf, is portrayed by Gael Garcia Bernal, fantastic actor. First and last seen in 2022's Werewolf by Night TV special. And so in the TV special itself, you don't get a distinct sense of his origin too much. In fact, like, you don't even know that he is lichen until, I don't know, 15 minutes in, maybe a third in. Yeah. Almost half. And so Jack is more or less introduced as a monster hunter who participates in a ceremonial hunt in order to win the coveted bloodstone. They call it the blood gem in the comics. It was the blood gem of the Bloodstone family. And then I think they realized, like, that's repetitive. Yeah. So let's just call it the Bloodstone and save the gem part. And so all these folks are trying to acquire this very powerful bloodstone, and it's more or less a supernatural relic of the family by the same name. And it's subtitled as a weapon like no other. So they don't really distinguish like what power it has, other than the fact that it makes whoever has it incredibly powerful. Yeah. And it doesn't have any direct relation with the stone, the Infinity Stones whatsoever. Yeah. It's just another gem. And of course, you know, in the special, little do the other hunters realize that Jack himself is also a monster afflicted with a curse or ability of turning into a werewolf. And he's just looking for his friend, which is really cute. I remember because for whatever reason, I was more familiar with Man-Thing, who is the giant monster, than I ever was with werewolves. So to see that it was him that Jack was attempting to save, like, really brought it home for me. I was like, this is awesome. I really loved it.
Super wholesome.
Yeah, super duper wholesome, because it's quite literally all he's trying to do. And of course it doesn't go so easily. And then I was going to say, we did a poll on social media, and I was very curious because I wasn't sure how people were going to answer, but I did put the question was, which version of this TV special do you like more?
The colored or the
black and white, color, or I haven't seen it yet. And 57% of people on Instagram said they hadn't seen it yet. What's happening here?
It's only like 40 minutes.
Yeah, it's like 52.
52, sorry.
But it's less than an hour long. I think it's fantastic. But I'm very curious why people don't watch it. You've seen it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I wonder why people haven't watched it yet.
Maybe just haven't gotten to it. Maybe.
I guess so.
Yeah.
I would think that the color version would at least inspire people to watch it. But I will say, if you haven't watched it yet, I would just stick to the black and white. I almost wished I had watched color first and then black and white.
Yeah.
Because the black and white version's like fantastic.
Yeah.
It's really, really good.
Very moody. Like it's
it really sets a nice tone. The colored version, and especially, with the ending that it has, it really comes together very well. But the color version, to start it in color and end it in color, I don't know. It wasn't as impactful for me, but it still had a grainy 80s feel, which I thought was also very genius, because it is a treatment that they've chosen, that Michael Giacchino chose to process the film in, to give it that sort of feel that wasn't quite modern, but just modern enough.
Are you okay?
What would you categorize as far as like the TV special goes? How did you enjoy it? How did you absorb it as a Marvel MCU fan?
I mean, I always love, especially the not one-offs, but like something that kind of derives a little away from the main MCU. Obviously, technically, everything still is part of the MCU, but seeing something that's brand new, I'm always all for it. And it's it's easy to take in. It's not like it's like a series that, we're forced to watch. It's like, it's a special presentation. It was for Halloween last year, and it was like super cool, enjoyable, and seeing like their take on like classic kind of movie horror. And it was good. Yeah, a black and white version. I was like, oh, this feels nice. Yeah. And like now it's like, oh, this now, and then at the end of it, it's kind of like, oh wait, this person's also, or this character's in the MCU now technically. So
yeah. I think it's interesting considering that we just talked about, and we just had that question from Super Fanboy Guy about like, do you think Marvel should do standalone films? And Werewolf by Night is a perfect example of a standalone that doesn't necessarily interweave with the rest of the MCU, but could if they really wanted to.
If they chose to, yeah.
And it was also, like, again, it was something very different that deviated from, quote unquote, the norm.
Yeah. That
would be the MCU. And so for all those reasons alone, I love it. Like, totally love it. I thought it was really great. And it introduced us to a whole other suite of characters that we might have not gotten otherwise, right? Like, when would they have ever created something for werewolf? Like this alone, like just me talking about it, it's like, it's such a, people are always going to think of Werewolf in London, like even Michael Jackson's Thriller, like other things that have werewolves embedded in them over this.
Yeah, but like in today's like scope of things, it's like a character like this would like only probably introduce like technically in like a movie. Yeah, like it's a cameo in the movie. Like, oh, who's that? And I was like, oh, it was Werewolf. And then we'll probably never see or hear from them again. Whereas in this space of streaming and you can do kind of whatever. It's like why not take this character that we have? Let's create a 50 minute special on it and see how it does, and like see like what kind of like the initial like feedback is, or it's like, oh, we can do this. and it's also like a stepping stone for filmmakers. Like we said, it's Michael Giacchino's first directorial debut. Yeah. So it's also like a thing too.
Yeah.
So why not?
Yeah, which is really interesting because I don't remember why I didn't watch it last year, the Director by Night special, but it was very interesting in that he had a very similar approach as far as Kevin Feige came with James Gunn. So Kevin Feige, more or less was like, so James, who, if you could do any movie, who would you want to do? And James was like, Guardians of the Galaxy. And he's like, what?
Like, are you sure?
And so Michael Giacchino had a very similar situation in that Kevin Feige had approached him to do the music for something, because he had already done many other suites. He did Spider-Man. He did the Tom Holland films. And so Kevin approached him about working on something else, and he said, hey, what is something you want to do that you haven't done yet? He's like, well, I'd actually love to direct something. And, he had this very colorful sort of background growing up and making Super 8 films, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And so he was basically living the 70s kid's dream, like by what he was doing. And he had a bunch of playmates. They would always make these movies, like in their backyards and in their neighborhoods. And so it was always something that he had wanted to do at the root of it. And so Kevin more or less gave him the opportunity. Okay, well, let's do it. What would you want to do? And he's like, Werewolf by Night. And Kevin was like, what? and Michael even said it was because when he was a kid, he read the comics.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really cool that he didn't, of all the characters he could have possibly have chosen, he did choose somebody that he thought was interesting. And I think he did a marvelous job with it. No pun intended. And the fact that it's his debut is mind blowing.
Yeah, but also it's like that's also like a good place to start because it's very tough to give a first time like director like a big movie, like a big 2.5 hour movie, 2 hour movie. So why not kind of like, okay, like let's see what you can do with like a 40-minute with this character and with this allotted budget.
Yeah.
And like you said about like oh, what character do you want to do? Like sometimes it's not like just about that. It's like, okay, then it's like how much money can you give me? Like what can I do? So there's a lot of like factors and like politics that go around into getting something made that we've never seen before. So but yeah, just it's like a little taste of like, oh, nice.
Yeah, he did such a great job. I love it.
I have to say, I'm having a hard time believing you hunted and killed monsters.
Well, I'm not that type of hunter.
And so from there, we'll move on to powers and paraphernalia. So thanks to the curse of lycanthropy, Jack has superhuman attributes, including strength, stamina, agility, reflexes, speed, acute senses, and durability, as well as enhanced claws and teeth and regenerative healing factor. He also excels in hand-to-hand combat. Shock. And like the classic tales, silver affects the monster. So if people come with him at with any sort of silver weapon, his wounds will heal. But if he gets shot by a silver bullet, especially to the heart, it will absolutely kill him. I think he's died a couple of times in the comics, but he's been not reincarnated, but he's been brought back to life, reanimated in some way, in a very classic monsters sort of method. And for the cinematic version, they don't really give you specifics because again, it's not a traditional MCU film. Yeah. So, but it's very likely that it's the same, and it's the case with the cinematic version. In its place, the Bloodstone has an adverse effect to the monster with Jack and like weakening him as the silver would. Yeah. So I think it's sort of like not a substitution, but like, let's just input this since it ties it more together than like silver. Let's hit him with silver. Like everybody knows that. Like whatever. But like we mentioned before, the Bloodstone itself, it just grants the wielder increased strength and longevity. So even though when they would put it on the monster against its will, it's weakening them. But if it's just a human bearing it, they become powerful. So we see that throughout the film, and unfortunately, it affects him adversely. As for his aesthetic, originally Jack looked more like the classic Wolfman of 1941, and as in the TV special, which is it's interesting because I wasn't sure how it was going to pan out, right? Like from his first appearance, here's a picture for you, Jeff, and he just like it's very.
It's like a big man wolf monkey with pants.
Right. He looks a little bit like Sasquatchy in the face.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. And then here's his transformation. And he is very much like a Caucasian man in the comics with like reddish brown hair.
So much fur.
He's very furry. He does look a bit ape-like in a weird way. But yeah, you know, he was drawn like that for the majority of his origin stories and his opening years.
Yeah.
And yeah, in the comics, he did eventually begin to look like an actual wolf. About 10 years in, and so like on our doc, Jeff, you'll see another picture from the comics where it is much more like the, I guess, modern day wolf look.
Yeah.
Very muscular, probably 7 feet something tall.
Yeah.
And so this sort of look, this picture is actually not of Jack specifically, but he does look like a wolf like this after his appearance in Moon Knight number 29 in 1982-83. So that's, I think it's a 4-issue or 3-issue crossover where Werewolf very seamlessly guest stars in the Moon Knight comic when it was drawn by the great Bill Sienkiewicz. And so it's very gritty. Bill Sienkiewicz is a very scratchy sort of artist. He's very jagged, and so his aesthetic fit perfectly with Wolfman with Werewolf and Moon Knight. And yeah, and it's kind of that whole occult like tone that brings the two characters together perfectly too. Yeah. Because you know what, Moon Knight, you get the mummy, the Egyptian lore, all that good stuff. Yeah. And then the schizophrenia on top of that. Like there's a lot going on. Don't even get me started. Yeah. So it's a lot of that goodness. And so yeah, it's definitely one to check out. And then of course the MCU version, he's a bit more like the original werewolf, where he's kind of got furry curly hair and he looks a little wolfy in the face, but he's not too wolf-like. He's still human in some aspects. And there is one major detail and Easter egg of the cinematic version, and that's the markings. And so from the beginning, you kind of get, like, you're like, what is the deal? Because he has these white markings all over his face. Yeah. And so it's a callback, actually, to one of Jack's comic book origins, where a devil worshipping cult led by a character named Scholler Belial tried to sacrifice Jack for a satanic hunt. And so this is when Moon Knight comes in and helps him. Jack managed to escape, but he then, he's adorned with these tattoos that remind him, like, someone's always going to come after you for your power. So don't forget. So in the comics, he actually has like I believe it's a crest or a half moon or crescent moon on his forehead. And then he has another moon on his tattooed on his chest. So it's just a reminder. It's more or less a reminder. So it's interesting that they would give it to the cinematic version, because then that sort of, if you know, you know. But it also alludes that there's more to him already that's already happened. And so the version we're being introduced to is seasoned already. He's past his origin story, and he's already kind of comfortable being who he is and with the curse. And of course, a shout out to Maya C. Rubio, who's contributed to many of the MCU costume designs by now, including the Thor films as well as WandaVision, and she did the work on Werewolf by Night. And from there, we'll go to family, friends, and affiliations. So there isn't too much here. We talked about his crazy family earlier on. His sister Lisa, it's also worth mentioning, she had the lichen curse as well, but it was actually, she was relieved of it, if you will. Yeah. But the two major characters that we will talk about that cross over in both versions of the comic and the cinematic universe are First, Elsa Bloodstone. So 3 words: badass monster hunter.
Yep.
I've said time and time again, the various times we've mentioned her, Elsa is definitely a character that I'd like to cover on her own, so we won't go into her that much. But yeah, they in the comics, they've crossed paths over and over again. They're in a title called Legion of Monsters together. Because again, she's a monster hunter, so the chaos follows. And then in the cinematic universe, Elsa Bloodstone, portrayed by the amazing Laura Donnelly. I can't unsee Jessica Jones. Like, I want them to be related in some way.
I can see it.
She's very close. Yeah, they have some very distinct likenesses. But both Elsa and Jack in the cinematic universe, they bond over Elsa's bloodline. So she's a direct descendant of the character Ulysses Bloodstone, who brings all those monsters together, well, hunters together. And then, of course, they become allies the minute the hunt starts. And then that part where Jack is learning her scent, like, kills me. It's just like Gael Garcia, like sniffing the hell
Yeah,
out
it's
of
like,
her.
who are you? Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, I have to remember you. But I loved the way that she was so spicy and British. Like, I love the fact she's British, of course, but
Yeah.
super spicy character, not unlike her comic book version. And it's interesting, that part in particular is very interesting, especially as a comic book reader, because he even says it in, it's like the tattoos, right? He's kind of calling back to stories that have not been told in the MCU yet, but do originate from the comics. So he says that only one person, she said, like, has this worked before?
Yeah.
And he goes, only once. And then you're like, who was the one? Like,
Yeah.
who is it? Who tell us? And they never tell you.
Yeah.
But in the comics, it's this whole other thing, which we'll get to shortly. But the other character worth noting as far as his friends and affiliations go is Man-Thing, a.k.a. Dr. Theodore Ted Sallis. And so in the comics, this is another one we can get into eventually, because he actually does have a really cool origin story. It's very similar to some of our other characters that have dealt with science. And so Ted was a young biochemist who worked with colleagues in an attempt to recreate the super soldier serum. And so he worked with familiar names like Dr. Bobby Morse, who is Mockingbird, as well as Dr. Kurt Connors, the Lizard. And so for Ted in the story, he injects himself with the version of the serum that he has in an attempt to stop thieves. So they were trying to steal the work. They came in, they were trying to resell it. And he's like, oh, I can handle this if I take the serum.
Yeah.
They can't steal it, and also I can stop them. But unfortunately, he failed big time, and he instead changed himself with equal parts science and magic, and he fell into a swamp, and then he became the Man-Thing.
So funny.
Yeah, so it's kind of like he tripped over his own shoelaces type of deal. And then, whoop, ba-ba-ba-bam, he's a giant Man-Thing. And Ted also was once a member of the Legion of Monsters alongside Werewolf by Night, the Manphibian.
Man, oh my God, these names, man.
So good. Cantu, the Living Mummy, and Morbius, the Living Vampire.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a great boy band right there. And then, of course, in the cinematic end of the spectrum, Man-Thing, a.k.a. simply known as Ted. It's funny because, like, you think it's a joke when he's like, what does she say? Like, what do I call him? And he's like, his name is Ted.
Oh, yeah.
And you're just like, what?
Like, really? Like, yeah. Ted.
Yes, Ted. But yeah, his name is Dr. Theodore Sallis. So he is a Ted. And so performed by Carrie Jones for the motion capture, and the editor of the special actually provided his vocalizations, Geoffrey Ford.
Nice.
So that's pretty awesome. I was like,
Yeah.
wow, can you imagine? They're like, is there anything else you can do, Jeff? And he's like, I can sound like a horse. And they're like, great. And so he sounds like those sounds
That's
he
funny.
does.
Yeah.
And he edited the special.
I mean, yeah. I mean,
That's
it sounds about
amazing.
right. Maybe he was editing. He was like, oh, I need a sound for him. And he was like,
Yeah.
I'll just record. That's a very editor thing to do.
That'd be amazing.
You're like, oh, I need something to just put a sound in there, and then you're like, oh, I'll just do it.
That's so cool.
And then it end up being like, oh shoot.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love Ted. Oh my god, he sounds great too. I think he did a great job. And so yeah, of course, Ted himself, Man Thing, is just another fellow monster being hunted by those trying to get the coveted bloodstone. And I forgot I wrote this. He's his own version of a sweet baby swamp thing and lovable at heart, because he really is. He's just like a big swampy swamp.
Yeah,
He's
get
like
out of my swamp.
Swamp Groot. And then, it's worth mentioning that from Iron Man to Moon Knight, Jack has also teamed up with various superheroes and teams, including the mercenary group known as Night Shift, and of course, the occult-adjacent Midnight Suns, which is another buzzword group that we have been hearing a lot about.
I know. So many groups.
Yeah, because if they did that, that would easily be Punisher, possibly Doctor Strange, possibly Iron Man. No, Blade, Moon Knight, and him.
Yeah.
Would be pretty tight, man. I don't know. And Elsa, if they wanted to.
I suggest we just pass each other by.
For love interest, so Jack has also had his fair share of flings for comic book fodder. Fling or not, he was once found in bed with Deadpool's wife. So Deadpool is married.
So hilarious.
Yeah, he's married to Shikla, which resulted in a comical blow off of his head. So he basically grabs a gun and he blows off Werewolf's head.
That's so funny.
Very comical version. So he dibble dabbles in that world a bit. Again, it's the occult adjacent. So that happened, but he's also had an actual affair with Martine Bancroft, a.k.a. Morbius's undead girlfriend.
It's so funny. So this whole like vampire horror side of
right? It's so cool, but it's also like I want to see them all together. But again, Sony has their grasp on Morbius, so we won't really get him, which is unfortunate because I think they could do some awesome stuff. But there is one in particular that's worth noting as far as the comics go and his love interest. At first, I was like, God, is there nobody? I couldn't recall. And I was like, oh, there's one, and her name is Topaz. And so the character herself, she has unknown origins. Topaz was raised by a sorcerer named Taboo and joined Jack on many of his quote-unquote adventures in adulthood, even beholding the power to control him as a werewolf at times. So she had the whole like, sun's getting real low, big guy. And she could control him when he was a wolf, which is unheard of. But again, occult adjacent. So if you're raised by a dude named Taboo, chances are you might have some sort of power or incantation that can control a werewolf. And so while she wasn't able to lift the curse entirely from Jack, she was successful with his sister Lisa. So she was the one that actually like removed the werewolf, the lycanthropy from his sister, but she's not as lucky when it comes to him. She can't do it for some reason. Maybe it's, I don't know, something in the male genes. I don't know. But Topaz has also had her fair share of run-ins with the mystical side of Marvel, having ties to Doctor Strange, Dormammu, and even Mephisto.
When is he coming to this?
But
so
see,
funny, man.
That's even more to add to the pot, right? All these names are all occult adjacent.
It's just so much going on.
So it's so it's like forget about multiverse. Like there's still room for all these characters to come together in some way.
Do you ever wish that maybe like, I know us having a podcast on the MCU may think that we're MCU biased, but we've had our fair share of criticism on this pod where we are like, we criticize the MCU.
Yeah.
Instead of like everything connecting, everything exists in the MCU. But what if it was just kind of like how Werewolf by Night is, where it's just, that's it. And like, they like it doesn't have to, because people are always like, oh, where's the other superheroes in this? Or what are they doing? So what's happening? Like, why aren't Thor and Captain America? Some like that. Like, but it's like, okay, if this just exists somewhere else.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the whole like, you know, the New York thing. It's like, this is happening in New York. So where is, you know,
They even say it in Secret Invasion.
Yeah.
Like,
they're like, where are the Avengers? Where is everybody else? And it's kind of like, I just think people should just be like okay of like it's fine if they don't like show up, like they don't have to. Like,
Yeah.
it's just his own singular story. So like, what if this story just remained how it is? It's like it is a story of werewolf, and then but in this microcosm of a universe, it's just Mephisto and Dab and Elsa and everything. But like, they don't have to bring out all these other bring in all these other characters.
I'd be okay with that. I'd be 100% okay with that.
Yeah.
Like, and it's kind of like a subdivision, right? Like a subgenre of like, instead of big picture, and maybe this is what Super Fanboy Guy meant. Like, instead of bigger picture MCU, everything's connected. Like, how about we stay a little connected and then just put them all together?
I mean, I also think like WandaVision was a good, like a result of that too. It's like, they just stayed in Jersey.
Jersey?
Was that Jersey? I
don't
forget,
remember.
dude. Small town.
It's been a minute.
I know, but it's just kind of like, but it was like, it was okay that it was just happening there. Like, yeah, it was noticed globally, but it was just like, but there still was like a full circle moment. So like, I just feel like maybe like that's like the route they should go.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
Or even like the Hawkeye thing, like even Hawkeye, like I think those Phase 4 shows were solid. Like if you didn't like them, it is what it is. But like they were solid.
They were
like
contained.
Yeah, they were very contained.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I was guilty of it. I mean, at the end of Hawkeye, we're like, oh, it's Christmas, or it's like, oh, they're in New York. Like Spider-Man would be good to just pop in here. Like I was guilty of that. I was like, oh, like that's crazy. But then it's also like he doesn't need to be there. But I know there's also like like people are also very logical. They're kind of like, wait, like how is Spider-Man like not like noticing this, or how is, you know, because you know it's also Fisk, so it's also like hello, but which I get, which is totally understandable, but it's also kind of like like I don't know, like I just feel like just let people tell the stories like for what they did. Don't have to always try to find like a way in to bring in somebody. Like there's always going to be a way in to bring any character, always. And I think that's like also the positive of the MCU. There's always going to be room for a character that maybe you can just throw in there. Like with like Yelena. Like it made sense for her to come in there. So it's like, but I don't know. Yeah,
I think they could do the same thing. They could approach it so like that, you know. And it's kind of like, I mean, the speculation even continues, right, with the Eternals and how at the very end, like, you know, like, oh, we might get the Black Knight, you know, with Dane Whitman, right?
Yeah.
And of course he has the sword and all that good stuff. And it's like, okay, he's a great segue into the occult as well. And so all these things are like, oh, you know, like who was it at the end? Who talked to him? And it's like, well, it might not be anybody. It really might not. It might have been just somebody who was like, I don't remember what he said, but all these opportunities to have these like, again, incredibly subgenre, sub niche like characters come together in a way that doesn't have to lead to a big baddie. Like they don't have to all then come together and fight Dormammu. Like, you know what I mean? Like they don't have to. They can just have their own side quest of fighting a smaller big baddie. And I would be great with that.
Yeah,
like,
that'd
be
totally
dope.
fine, man.
Yeah.
You know, shorten the budgets.
Yeah.
Obviously, like, I was just talking to Dai today about the variety hit piece on Marvel, and it's very like, it's very fair. Like, like spend a lot of money on the way they've been doing things for the runs of show and how they're pumping out all these shows, how much money they're spending on shows, and you obviously can see the quality depending how you look at it. Yeah. So it's like and because everything is pretty much Marvel, you know, now, and they're just pumping out content, so it's kind of like, I hope they realize, and I think they have realized in some capacity of like, okay, maybe we need to kind of like step it up or step back, dial it back, and like really see where we want to like aim with things. But obviously, control what you can control. Obviously, with the strikes, at least with the actor strikes still going. Just dial it back and kind of just, I don't know. I feel like never feel like you have to reinvent something if something ain't like broke, you know. Exactly. Like obviously there are factors you can't control, like with COVID, the strikes. Now you're trying to kind of like get back into swing of things because of COVID, and then now with the strikes. But then also like you've announced all these things, but has been no traction. So it's kind of like where do you go? Like where are we go? Like where are you going? What do you want to do? Like don't feel like you have to rush things.
And then this whole like, they reconsidered bringing back Iron Man and Black Widow, and I'm like,
and I was like,
they literally have Yelena Belova.
I was like, oh my god,
yeah.
Like people know like I love Marvel a lot, but then I'm also like I know when to be like no. So like when I read that today, I was like, dude, please, like no,
stop.
You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become a villain.
That's exactly right. Where were we?
I know that was like
we were at the tail.
That was almost like a borderline rant,
yeah,
and of like a self-realization of like, see, this is where we're going. But we were talking about like how this probably, if there was like this own microcosm of like horror comic characters,
it'd be great. Like
damn, like what if there was like a few month run of like it's the werewolf special, and then there's like a man thing special, right? And then they formed the Legion, and you're like, what? That's crazy.
That's exactly what they should do.
And then you just end it, and that's it. You don't have to bring it up ever again.
Yep.
And it's like people, what happened? And then people are gonna be like, well, what happened to them? It's like, that was it.
Yeah.
It happened. It done. They did their thing.
Because again, people have that expectation of like, oh, we get Captain America for 10 years. And it's like, well, no, it doesn't go for every character because people don't want that character for 10 years.
But also those deals were made at a time of like where the
time.
MCU still had to prove themselves.
Yeah. And also just contracts were different. Everything was different. So I think people have a hard time grasping that. That was the format then. This is exactly why there are strikes right now. Like it's the same issue, and it's also so that they don't get to impose Chris Evans's face on Captain America without his consent for 10 more years. You know, it's a lot of that, and it's unfortunately people are just like, well, I want to see. It's like, well,
can't please everybody. I just feel like, but I know MCU, Kevin and them, they have like they have. Like how they want things pan out, but yeah. So I would love that they realize that there is like value in doing this subgenre, self-contained stories. Yeah, I don't think it's gonna happen, but
I don't think it'll ever happen. But I mean,
I will say, I think today after reading that Variety piece, and I think there was that book, that timeline, MCU timeline book.
I have it right here.
Yeah,
I just got it,
and I would see some highlights from Twitter saying like. Oh, like, so, like, this is can't, whatever. So there was, like, a small part of me that, like, said, I was like, oh, man, this is going to get too confusing. Like, this is going to get,
it's the comics.
It's going to get pretty overwhelming. And which is also fair, because that's how the comics are.
Yeah. People
are saying, like, oh, my God, like, everything's so confusing. And it's like, da-da-da-da. But then if you go to the comics, and then it's like,
but I think that it's another thing of, like, people just need to let it go.
Yeah.
Like, if they're so hell-bent on finding the errors, that's what leads to the
if you're nitpicking things to the Earth universe number, you're kind of like,
where the self-destruction
like,
is.
what are you trying to do here?
Oh yeah, dude? And so that's why people are just like, people forget that this is still 2012 Loki, like you know. And
I have to keep.
It's all of it in hindsight is not that complicated. It's just that they've also done the thing where they're ahead of us.
Yeah.
It's 2025 in current time Marvel, so they're also doing that. But I just think I think everybody's having over anxiety issues with everything.
But yeah, give us the Legion. Screw it. Give us Morbius.
I would take Morbius at this point. I still think Morbius wasn't even that bad. I think what's his toes, Doctor Who boy, was actually the worst person in that film. But I think that this is the part of the corner of MCU that they're missing out on, because I think Werewolf is also incredibly good.
Yeah.
But like our own listener said, 57% of them didn't even watch it, which is unfortunate because it's so good, it's short, and it's self-contained. So if Marvel wanted to even do it, unfortunately the people aren't listening, and so it's or watching, and so it's kind of like, well, I don't know. So, you know, corporations, they see the big bucks, and unfortunately the right way doesn't always win at the end of the day.
Yeah. You hurt? Can I help you?
No.
Okay.
But in other news, we were talking about Topaz. So yeah, she has had many of a run-in with other mystical and occult adjacent characters in the comics, but we don't see her in the MCU whatsoever. But I do believe, like I mentioned with Elsa, that I believe that the one person that Jack mentions that he remembered as a werewolf was Topaz. So yeah, we just got the idea that there may have been one person that he imprinted on or remembered, and yeah, so I that's my guess, and it's another if you know you know. I don't think they'll get into it, but I mean that'd be pretty cool to see a little bit more backstory and more Man Thing and all that good stuff. But as for notable adversaries, yeah, there's aside the ones that we mentioned in his origins, Jack doesn't seem to have overtly consistent adversaries, but he's had some repeat encounters with familiar names like Sabretooth, Desmond Druid, the followers of the Darkhold, and Vlad Tepes himself, a.k.a. Dracula. And then as for the MCU, all of the other adversaries Jack encounters seemingly have no comic book counterparts, actually. So all the people that we meet, all of the hunters, they are all, as far as I understand, they're all original characters. So
love that.
Yeah, that includes Verussa Bloodstone, portrayed by Harriet Sansom Harris, Joshua Joven, portrayed by Kirk R. Thatcher, Azrael, portrayed by Eugenie Baudron, Leorn, portrayed by Leonardo Nam, and Brasso, portrayed by Daniel J. Watts. And of course, additional credit to narrator Nick Wasserman, as well as Richard Dixon, who voices Ulysses Bloodstone. Very, very great cast. Yeah, I was kind of surprised. There is another character named Azrael in the comics, but I am pretty sure it's not the same character. It's very, very different. But that brings us to other versions and in other media. So there's not really, it's not a variant per se, but I wanted to bring him up. There is another version of the character. So like other, like, you know, there's like Miles and Peter, for instance. There is another werewolf. And so he's also taken the moniker, his name is Jake Gomez. He's half Native American, half Mexican, and he's actually transformed by Native American supernatural power. Shout out to Native American History Month, by the way. Yeah, and so he's actually the picture that I used earlier, like in our doc, Jeff. He's the one that looks like an actual lichen wolf. He hasn't made that many appearances, though. I think he's only had like just over a handful of comic book appearances to date, but he is another werewolf in the universe. And then aside that, yeah, you know, like we mentioned at the top of the show, there is a color version of the TV show itself, despite being originally produced as color. So there's this whole thing in the Director by Night that, or some article that I read that Giacchino had always kind of wanted to do it in black and white because of the tone of and the nature of the story, but Kevin Feige was so uncertain that it would work that he made him film it in color. So it was treated for black and white. After the fact, they realized, oh, the black and white is better. Released it first, and then the colored version that we see now is more or less the original version. So yeah, so that's kind of an interesting fact for the special. And then as for Almost Was, absolutely no one. So like many of the talent in recent years, Gael was handpicked by director Michael Giacchino himself. He didn't even audition before accepting the role, and he even did research on werewolf mythology to prepare for the role. So he really went like deep. He leaned in real fast after, you know, Michael called him up and was like, "Hey, I have a project in mind. How are you? Are you interested?" Yes, I am interested. Of course. And he took it, and yeah, that was done deal. Which is funny. Also, you know, I've read on various sites that people, when Gael got casted at first, people were speculating that he was the Jake Gomez version, and then they like debunked that by saying no, he's Jack. So I'm glad that he's the original, the OG. It's pretty cool. And then yeah, the future of the character in the MCU. We've kind of
we kind of talked about that in our rant.
Yeah. And so I did want to get to, the book. So I did just get the official timeline book because I was morbidly curious. I wasn't going to buy it. I was like, they'll probably have another version in like 4 months. But the big question is, where does Werewolf by Night sit on the official MCU timeline? So a number of theories online by, armchair sleuths have been put into place considering the year is never displayed in a definitive detail or spoken about by any of the characters. And you can't tell. You just can't tell. Like the black and white, you're like 1829.
Honestly, yeah, I thought so.
It seems like it, right? But again, some people online have cracked the code, and if you pay attention, you can actually find some key dates in the special. And I saw them twice because I watched it twice. But if you look in when Elsa and Jack get stuck in the mausoleum with all the tombs, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You see all these tombstones, these headstones, and you can see that some of them have dates. And so the earliest, some of them have like 1670, 18, whatever. Yeah. But the latest date is one just above when Elsa breaks the middle stone to get the key out. There is a date on the one just above. I think it's Bernadette or somebody.
Yeah.
It said died 1986.
That's interesting.
So that places the film at the earliest in 1980s.
Because I was gonna say, how can you tell from a grave from a cemetery?
But it says
like
dead.
It could go from
died.
like 17 whatever. To, but if the earliest or if the latest death that's there,
exactly,
is
an 80s,
and it said died 1980s,
then there it is.
So either
right?
they're in the 80s or about they're entering the 90s. So it could be. That's crazy.
It's very interesting, and so There's also
because it doesn't look like I legit was like 1800s for sure.
I
dude. Like this is one of them old timey things, like for sure. And it comes off like that.
Exactly, especially if you think of the comic book origins as well. Like maybe he's not Grigory, maybe he's not his great grandfather, but it's that's how far the story feels.
Yeah.
And so in the actual introduction, so they open the entire series itself with a picture of the Avengers, and it leads down to these hand-drawn like historical notes, right? Yeah. And so on the page of Ulysses' death, so it's the last page of the journal that they actually show, the words "Etto cidor in ultima plenilunio anni."
Nice.
Thank you. That's for my Latin friends. I hope I didn't screw it up. It translates into "and is killed on the last full moon of the year." So that's another indicative point of like, okay, so where was this last full moon? So with its timeline placement positioned after Thor: Love and Thunder and the notation that Jack will turn into a werewolf on the first full moon of the new year, it's then deduced that the first full moon of 2026 is January 3rd. So 5 nights prior to that is December 29th, 2025, which is when the special supposedly takes place.
That's crazy.
So to correlate that finding, I bought the book to see if it matched up.
Did they say?
It says.
Oh, they give a date?
It's interesting. We'll get to that in a second. So it says like, okay, I have the book in my hand. So let's say, okay, we're in 2025, right?
In the MCU?
In the MCU, we're in the 2025. And so Kamala Khan becomes Ms. Marvel. Mm-hmm. Thor, Love and Thunder occurs.
Yeah.
And then you turn the page. You turn the page again. And it says fall 2025. The hunt begins. So Werewolf Unleashed is fall 2025, which is more or less December, I guess. It's late December.
It could be like, it could be like September. September.
Yeah. Depends the calendar.
9 to 12. 9 to 12.
Yeah. Yeah. But, which is very rare for this book, there is a Ms. Minutes at the bottom of this little category, because this is right before the Guardians special. So the Guardians Christmas special happens after Werewolf by Night.
Yes.
On the timeline.
Yes.
So
yes.
Yeah. Like not in release schedule, but like in history.
Okay.
In MCU history. So there's a little Ms. Minutes. And it says, TVA alert, these events seem to occur in 2025, but magical influences can make stuff like this hard to pin down.
Wow.
So
we don't know.
we don't know. It could be an alternate universe.
That's crazy that
But
they even like added that.
They added it. And so I wasn't willing to just settle for it online. I was like, no, I need to get the book and feel physically and like actually see, oh, it's printed in here. It actually happens at this point on the timeline. So somewhere between,
that's crazy.
Yeah, somewhere between late September and December is when Werewolf by Night happens after Love and Thunder. So after Jane Foster dies, here comes Werewolf by Night before Peter Quill finds out that Mantis is his sister.
So how many writers does that book have? Did you ever get it? Did you ever get to like?
No, I haven't properly looked at it.
Yeah.
But there is a foreword by Kevin Feige. I'm sure there's at least 25
Like
authors.
what was it like Panic Room? Like was like
Oh, the war room must be insane.
like what war? Like who was in that war room to be like guys? Like
Yeah.
and this is the Charlie Day meme.
Yeah.
Just like
but you know it exists, right? Like
Yeah.
you know it exists.
like someone had to meticulously
Yeah.
like put these dates and be like
Exactly.
oh does this and it's like oh well this happened. You're
Yeah.
like ah.
Well, it's great because the speculation is quelled. Like it goes all the way to the end of now.
So where does the TVA stand?
I think they have that.
Do they?
'Cause
Because
they
time doesn't
start-
exist there.
That's a trick question, right?
That is
Because
a
at
trick
the
question.
very end, so this all happens, right? I'm gonna flip through this book. This all happens
Gee.
in chronological
That's
order,
like
right?
13 years of just.
But it starts. The timeline itself starts in this book, 5,000 BCE,
Eternals.
when the Eternals arrive on Earth,
Ah!
and it goes by every major year down to the season, all the way
Wow.
through the 80s, the 90s.
That's a coffee table book right there, man.
Right, that's why it's on my coffee table. All the way. The last date, I believe, is spring 2025. Winter 2025. The last known documentation is the Christmas special. So that then brings us to Guardians.
So volume 3 is not on there.
Volume 3 is not in here
Okay,
yet.
so a lot of the phase and towards the end of phase 5 is not in there.
It's Quantumania.
Quantumania is the last.
Quantumanium onward is not.
Okay.
So
fair.
that means that all the Loki stuff happening now is
But I also
the
feel like the
latest.
Loki, I feel like the TVA stuff is just
Yeah.
purgatory
Yeah, I
because
agree.
technically the TVA doesn't.
Limbo.
Yeah, limbo.
Yeah.
That's my. I like
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So that's interesting. I'm curious if they'll ever. I mean, but again, it's one of those delightful scenarios where they don't have to justify anything. It can just float on the timeline, and it doesn't matter because it's so. It could be from the 1800s. It could be from 2025. Who knows? I'm okay with it.
See,
Doesn't-
it's stuff like that. See, that made me put like a happy face. I'm like, oh, that's so cool.
It's great. You
It's
should look
super
through it.
cool.
Yeah,
but then
it's
you
really
think about
cool.
like all these projects that have happened. You're like, okay,
Yeah.
if they just dial it back even
Yeah.
like 20, even like 10%.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
Like, it's
it'll
fine.
be fine. Everyone's just
2 to 3
hysteria-
movies a year, 2
hysteria.
shows a year. That's it.
Yeah,
That's fine.
I think they're fine. I
That's
think
literally it. Though you don't
think-
have to be
yeah.
like, no, we need to get in it. Like, no,
yeah,
shut up.
No. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, no one's gonna listen to us, but shut up.
So suggested reading. This was tough because there is a lot of good content, and there also is not as much as you would expect. The character does make a lot of cameo appearances, but if you want the overview of who Jack Russell is, or just Werewolf by Night in general, if you want to read a little bit more about Jake Gomez as well. You can start with 2009's In the Blood, published under Marvel Max. So it's a different take. It's sort of like a reboot in a weird way, but it's obviously super duper bloody, super duper chaotic version of the character. 2011's Legion of Monsters, like I mentioned, featuring the characters previously mentioned, and they're all there for a good time. Really fun book. 1983 run of Moon Knight, which I mentioned, they have that short crossover, and it does kind of allude a little bit more into the curse that Jack encounters with the satanic cult. And of course, the 1972 run of Marvel Spotlight, focusing on Werewolf by Night, specifically issues 2 through 4, which do pretty much cover Jack's entire 18th birthday when he becomes a werewolf onward, and his weird stepdad uncle. But that said, thanks for listening. Next episode, yeah. So like I said, I'll finally be done with Spider-Man 2, the game. So we'll discuss all the good things. And then after that, on the heels of the Marvel's release in theaters, we'll be covering the one and only Monica Rambeau. So yeah, so that'll be good. And then last but not least, a We're Groot salute to Jenny, Robin, Eve, Ashley, Sherry, Nats, Katie, Andrea, Edgar, Tyler, Melanie, Ed, Andrew, Claire, Laura, Ariel, Chris, and Joe Liz. Follow us on social at STRKCNTRST. And if you like what you hear, review, rate, and subscribe.
Woo! Once again, thanks for listening. We will catch y'all in the next one.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.